Thank you. All right, let's try this again. Welcome to the Norwood Conservation Commission meeting, Wednesday, November 18th, 7:30 p.m. As we've been doing in the remote environment, I'm going to go down the list of commission members and just ask you to verbally confirm your presence, starting with myself. Stephen Washburn is here. Chris Capizio.
Here.
Peter Bamber.
Here.
Yeah.
John Gear.
John here.
Heather Miller.
Here.
Carly Rockland.
Here.
And Catherine Walsh.
Here.
Excellent. All right. First on our agenda tonight, it looks like we have requests for determination of applicability. Norwood number is going to be N2020-07. Applicant is Massachusetts Department of Transportation Highway Division, represented by Andrea Coates. Project description is application of herbicides at spot locations under an approved vegetation management plan on Route I-95 and Route 1. I believe this is a continuation from our November 4th meeting.
We do have Michael Clements here from Mass DOT. Do you want to describe this project to the commission, Mr. Clements?
Sure. Again, it's Mike Clements, Mass DOT Highway Division, District 5 office in Taunton. What we have before you tonight is a request for determination of applicability with a hope to receive a negative determination for this work. The work involves basically the application of herbicides along the roadsides on I-95 and Route 1. Primarily, our roadside management program, vegetation management program, consists of mowing, application of herbicides, and other methods. Generally, about 94% of the work done is done by mowing, mechanical means. We do about 1% herbicides, and the other 5% is other various methods. Most likely, generally using a person out there with a weed whacker and cutting the vegetation back. The purpose of this is mostly a safety issue. We need to keep the roadway sidelines kind of clear for it helps visibility for traffic, and if things get too out of control, it can create something falling into the roadway, which create a further hazard. The reason why we're here tonight to apply for herbicide applications is to do the work that we will be doing with the herbicides. If we don't get that approval, we would be out there with our weed whackers, putting our personnel in harm's way. It's a safety issue. It's also, to be honest, a cost issue as well. It's more cost effective to use the herbicides. We have used herbicides in the past. Last time we used them, I believe it was back in 2012. We've gotten a directive from our Boston office that they would like to see us begin using them again because it's more cost effective, and we don't have to put as many workers in harm's way. The process that we use is it'll be a truck applying the herbicides. The herbicides we use are typically Oust, Accord, Roundup. All these materials have been approved by the Department of Agricultural Resources and the Department of Environmental Protection. They've approved these materials for application for this application. The application is applied to either the concrete median center median or along the concrete, the granite edging, and underneath the guardrail. The spray path is typically a 2 to 2.5 foot path that the spray path uses from the truck. we can control it. It's a low pressure under 60 psi application. The application itself is only done in good weather. We don't apply during rainstorms or during a threat of rain, and also on windy days, anything above 10, 15 miles an hour, we do not apply. And a question I received in the past was, how do we know what the weather is going to be? We subscribe to the National Weather Service, and they send us updates generally every day, especially during the winter season, but during the summer season as well. And we utilize those to determine the weather, and if, like I said, if there's a bad weather forecast that is forecasted, we will not be out there spraying. Now the spray typically, it comes out as a wet spray, but when it dries is considered inert. That's the basic premise of what we're doing. This is regulated under two different departments. It's the Division of Agricultural Resources and also the Department of Environmental Protection. And the Department of Environmental Protection regulations is the reason why we're here tonight, because we need to have a date of determination before we can finalize our vegetation management plan that is required under the Department of Agricultural Resources. Some of the other commissions have asked, how do we know when the vegetation management plan is approved? Our plan gets submitted, and it is the Department of Agricultural Resources and us notify all the individual towns that we will be spraying in. We notify the selectmen, the Board of Health, and the Conservation Commissions. That plan would be available online. If you would like to review it and comment on it, that is the appropriate method to approve the VMP, and any comments that you may have are welcome by the Department of Agricultural Resources. Now, once the plan is approved, I think I mentioned that it's a plan that's approved for 5 years. We have a 5-year window that we can spray, and we can spray yearly under that plan. But each year that we intend to be out there spraying, we need to also provide a yearly operational plan to the Department of Agricultural Resources, and that plan is also noticed in the environmental monitor as well as the vegetation management plan. And the local towns that we will be spraying in are notified, so that the plan can be yearly operational plan can be reviewed and commented on as well. I have the spray no spray maps that we sent you on my second computer here that I can go through and review if that's something the commission wants, or I can take any comments you might have right now if you think you're sufficiently familiar with it and don't want to be bored with with me going through the plans. Is that right?
We could take a look at the plans if you wanted to breeze through them quickly. I'm always happy to look at a map. I think maybe that could be helpful if you have your proposed areas to be treated on a plan that would also show the buffer zones.
The plans do not show the buffer zone. We show we show where resource areas are located, and we show where we intend to spray, and we show where we intend to not spray close to resource areas. I should also explain a little further. The Department of Agricultural Resources considers they have setbacks for resource areas, and typically the setback that we be employing is 10 feet. However, in most instances, we are exceeding that. We go back 100 feet from riverfronts and streams and other wetland resources. So, if you want, we can go through those quickly. Hopefully, let me pull them up here. Let's start with Route 1. Route 1 starts at the Walpole town line, and we're going to Northwood.
Mr. Clements, we can't see your screen right now. I did make you a presenter.
I can't. The problem I have is I can't share the plans that I have because they're saved on our hard drive that's protected by a VPN, and I can't bring them over. Readily bring them over. If you have them, I that would be easiest. I
have them.
Share them?
and share them with everyone. I can talk from that standpoint. Like,
Holly, do you have them up? I have them.
I do.
Okay.
Just one moment.
I feel like they're pretty straightforward. So they mark the wetlands and do not spray zones.
yeah.
Great.
So Route 1, you should start on plan 8 of 12. So that's not quite the start. There you go. Down one page. Nope, up, down. Sorry. Yeah, right there, 8 of 12. That is, we're starting at mile marker 20 and going to mile marker 21. Again, you'll see we have several no spray areas that by Chapel Brook, and one other brook that's a little bit south of there that does not have a name. Again, there's a just south of Union Street before the. Excuse me, that's in Walpole. Do you want to start in the first that little up to 21? We don't really see anything there. So let's go to mile marker 22. Next plan 9. That's it. So again, Chapel Brook is at pretty much at mile marker 21 there. Then we're going up towards Moore Street. There's a series of wetlands there that we're not spraying. Let's go down to page sheet 10. There's Meadow Brook that's not sprayed, and then on sheet 12 there is. Go back up. Sorry. On sheet 12 there is. Let's see. Going into Westwood, there's the Planningfield Brook and Purgatory Brook where we have no sprays areas. Again, those no spray areas where the brooks are, they're 100 foot. They're basically 100 feet back of the wetland area that's associated with the brook. I feel that we're pretty protected. Pretty protected there. Also, if you notice, just in that west area and pointing downward is an interim wellhead protection area, which is protecting the area in Norwood that from mile marker 24 to mile marker 25. That's an interim wellhead protection area that is protected by DEP. There's a wells near there and that's why that interim wellhead protection area is there. In those areas, we only spray every other year. So if we were to get approval this year, we would spray most likely in the spring of this year, sometime in May and June, and then next year, 2021, we would not be spraying, and then we would spray again in 2022. All right, so that's quickly going through Route 1. If you can go into Route 25, Route 95, excuse me. We started at mile marker 21, and we go into into Norwood at approximately mile marker 21.6 or thereabouts. You'll see there's a zone 2 now. There's an identified zone 2 in the area. So again, that's a spray area where we spray. If we were to spray this year on approval, we wouldn't spray next year. 21, we would spray again in 2022. Turning down to mile marker 23, the Ponce River there crosses, and we don't spray near the Ponce River. And then just north, not the Ponce River, just north of the Ponce Street interchange, the Ponce River crosses back over it, and we don't spray near that the Ponce River. And that's pretty much the areas of spray, no spray, very quickly. If the commission has any concerns or wants any additional no spray areas, we're more than willing to entertain those and work with you to increase the area where we may where you have your concern.
Thank you for that, Mr. Clements. I think at this point we could turn to Ms. Jones for some input, hear from her, and then turn to the rest of the commissioners with questions or comments. I would say this was very helpful for me to just get a better perspective on the scope of the project. That was good for me.
Okay. I hope it helped.
Okay, I'm just trying to figure out how to turn off screen share.
You're doing better than I am.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, great. So this application is under the Wetland Protection Act only. I guess I actually learned a few things from Mr. Clements' presentation. I hadn't realized that it was going to be a truck application, and I hadn't realized that it was all going to be so for wetlands that aren't rivers, you're spraying within 10 feet of the wetlands?
Within 10 feet. Now, I don't know if I mentioned how we delineate those wetland areas and no spray areas are. We have little reflectors that we mount on the guardrail or mount on the signpost that tell us where to spray and where not to spray. Like they're color coded. Green is good for every year. Blue, I think, is every other year, and then red is it's a wetland area where we're not going to be spraying. Now you did mention that the setback typically for wetland areas is 10 feet. I'm more than willing to entertain a 100-foot setback for those as well. I will say especially on 95, where the 95 is, should we say, is a raised highway with a like a 1-to-1 slope. So by the time you actually get down to the toe of slope, you're probably close to 50 to 100 feet away anyhow. So I take that into consideration as well if you would. But if you have any other if you have concerns as well as how things are delineated on the maps, we're more than willing to meet you out in the field to take a look at things if that's a thing. I know we're under a COVID kind of restriction now, but we can be somewhat effective, I believe, and stay 6 feet back and take from there if that's really a major concern of yours.
Okay. So thank you. That was helpful. And then can the commission assume that for areas that aren't wetlands or protected buffer zones that there is likely to be spraying in the median or elsewhere?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'll be honest with you, provided we get the approval and the vegetation management plan itself gets approved, yes. And we're moving forward. The contract, there's vegetation plan itself that needs to be approved yet through DIR and the yearly operational plan. and then we also need to advertise and have a contractor on board. So there's a whole bunch of hoops to go, but even after we get through this hoop.
Okay. So my reading of the Wetlands Protection Act, so there are two questions before the commission. One is the wetland boundaries, and then one is, given the accuracy of the wetland boundaries, is the work itself jurisdictional? For application of herbicides within the buffer zone, there is a presumption in the act that application of herbicide shall be presumed not to alter an area subject to protection if it's performed in accordance with rights of way management, providing a determination has been given by the commission. So I think for the buffer zones, I think that the applicant is entitled to that presumption. There is a resource area that is not a buffer zone that we're dealing with as well, which is the outer 100 feet of the 200-foot riverfront area, where the act states that application of herbicide for management of rights of way within a riverfront area, provided it's outside of any other resource area, shall be accorded an exemption, again, so long as the work is performed in the rights of way management. So it is my understanding that for both of those areas, for outer riverfront and for buffer zone work, that the work would be afforded a presumption of not altering a resource area. So based on that interpretation, I would suggest issuing a negative determination of applicability, assuming that the commission agrees with the wetland boundaries.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Mr. Bamber, I see you. Go ahead.
I would make a motion to issue a negative determination.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Bamber and Mr. Gear. As we've been doing in the remote environment, I'm going to go down the list of commissioners and just ask you to verbally state your position on this vote, starting with myself. Stephen Washburn is in favor. Aye. Chris Capizia.
Aye.
Peter Bamber.
Aye.
John Gear.
Aye.
Heather Miller.
Aye.
Carly Rockland.
Aye.
And Catherine Walsh.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you for being here tonight, Mr. Clements. Do you have anything else to add before we continue?
I think I'm good. I appreciate the support, and we hope to. The other question I didn't throw in there was if Holly or the commission would like to meet with the contractor beforehand. I would encourage you to put that in as one of your conditions in the order. Not the order. Excuse me, in the determination if you so desire. I mean, I don't think that's anything outlandish to request. So I would endorse that if you want. If you like, I should say.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea to put as a condition in the negative determination, just to make sure that
they check in
the field.
Yeah, they check in to make sure. Because we would like to, hopefully this goes well this year, and we would like to continue into the future. So I would like to get that, make sure we have that positive working relationship going.
That sounds good. I don't think that we need a new motion to include that in the negative determination. But maybe we should just make a motion Just in case. Just,
I'll second the motion I just heard barked out. I make that motion.
Okay.
A second.
Do I have a second? Thank you. As we've been doing in the remote environment, I'll go down our list of commissioners and just ask you to verbally state your position on this vote, starting with myself. Stephen Washburn is in favor. Aye. Chris Capizio.
Aye.
Peter Bamber.
Aye.
John Gear.
Aye.
Heather Miller.
Aye.
Carly Rockland.
Aye.
And Catherine Walsh.
Aye.
For being here tonight, Mr. Clemens.
Thank you.
We
you very much.
will certainly welcome that collaborative effort. Thank you again. Next up on our agenda tonight, looks like we have notice of intent, DEP file number 251-0518, Norwood number N2020-08. University Ave, applicant is Joseph Federico Jr., represented by Luke Fabry, Geological Field Services, Inc. Project description is after the fact permitting of construction of stormwater management features and extension of retaining wall per Massachusetts Attorney General consent decree. All work is in the buffer zone and has already been completed. Do we have Mr. Fabry or Mr. Federico here to speak with us?
Mr. Fabry is here to speak with you.
Good evening, Mr. Fabry. Thank you for being
Good evening. Thank you for having me. My name's Luke Fabry. Excuse me. I work for Geological Field Services, and I'm here to represent UVA LLC, Joe Federico, for this notice of intent. The notice of intent has been submitted pursuant to an enforcement order that was issued by the Commission on September 11th. There are 3 activities cited in the order. They were the discharge of industrial stormwater contaminated with sediment and other pollutants from the facility to the town of Norwood's municipal store drain, which discharges to Purgatory Brook, tributary to the Neponset River. The second was the commencement of construction work for stormwater infrastructure within a buffer zone of a bordering vegetative wetland without a valid order. The third was the alteration of site affecting hydrology in violation of an ongoing condition of an order of conditions, DEP number 251-0435. And I'll just give, if I may, a little bit of background on the project and bring anybody who's not up to speed on it up to speed. The applicant submitted a notice of intent in 2013 to construct access to the property and stormwater management structures to remove sand and gravel and rock. The order was issued on September 18th, 2013 and was recorded at the Registry of Deeds. Work in the protected areas, resource areas, was to be completed with 1 year unless extensions were applied for and granted. There was a long-term maintenance requirements of the order to include stormwater management and sedimentation control, and the applicant was to prepare a SWIP, stormwater pollution prevention plan, and acquire a NIPDES permit from EPA before work began. Earth removal outside the protected resource areas and the buffer zone was to be conducted in 2 phases, and the phased removal was not conditioned by the order. And I included a copy of the 2013 order in the this notice of intent. So in the first year, 2013, under the previous order, the lower detention basin, driveway, catch basins, curbing were constructed and sand and gravel removal began. All the access features and stormwater management features fall within a buffer zone of a protected resource area. Those were the ones that were constructed in 2013. There was an upper detention basin that had been permitted, which was outside of the buffer zone, and that was not constructed during the first year because that portion of the property was, filled with sand and gravel that had to be mined out. So the 2013 order expired in 2014, or it had a 1 year, limit for constructing the access road and stormwater controls. Work at the site continued to 2020. There was never a SWIP obtained or prepared for the project, and they failed to acquire a NIPD's permit. The Attorney General's office identified that as a violation, and they issued a complaint against the entity, and a consent decree was issued for the case, and that was occurred over the summer. It was just actually finalized, I think, a month ago. And the consent decree required the construction of a primary detention basin on the upper level of the property, enlargement of a secondary detention basin, which currently exists at the foot of the driveway, and to retain a retaining wall structure, and the extension of a retaining wall structure at the upper portion, and capping or removing 2 catch basins at the mouth of the driveway. Their issue was they thought that the stormwater was discharging onto University Avenue. It is not actually discharging onto there. The water does go into the detention basin and then travels, if it overflows, through a pipe into the stormwater system, the town stormwater system. So after given a November 15th deadline in the consent decree, Mr. Federico's crew began installing the extension of the retaining wall structure that was basically ordered by the Attorney General's office. It was not something that we thought was needed. We wanted to continue a floor to curb up the sidewalk, and they requested that we extend this existing structure down to the driveway so that any water or no water can go over the edge of the property. It basically all travels down. Anything that runs off the top travels down the driveway to the secondary detention basin. Now, the increase of size of the detention basin was so that the site can capture a 100-year storm event in its entirety with no discharge. So there was an upper detention basin that had been proposed in 2013. We've kind of redesigned that a little bit so that it's not a 2-chamber basin, but a 1-chamber basin. And when I get through this, I'll pick up the plans and we can, I'll show you where those are on the plans. So the crew started building that wall, and that is really the only structure that's within the buffer zone of a resource area of this project, and that has been completed. It was completed in a day. It was graded and reseeded, and I included photographs of the wall and the reseeded area in the notice that was submitted, and it's, by now it's well grassed and established vegetation. Mr. Federico also started building the upper detention basin when he received the this enforcement order and stopped. The upper detention basin is actually outside of the buffer zone, the 100-foot buffer zone, as is the lower detention basin. The two manholes, catch basins, are within the buffer zone, but as I stated in the notice of intent, I don't think that welding a lid on top of the catch basin so it can't take water is an action that is regulated by the Act. So having stopped work, the upper detention basin is receiving water and it's stable, but we need to finish that. And again, that's the spillway. Part of the spillway for that extends into the buffer zone. And I'd like to propose a change to the plan that we submitted to move that spillway about 50 feet to the east, which it takes it out of the buffer zone entirely. And that's not really because of the buffer zone, but it sticks out into the Algonquin easement. And to construct it, the engineer wants us to excavate 24 inches of material to build up the riprap, and the pipe that runs through the Algonquin pipeline is only about 30 inches below grade, and that's not going to fly. That excavation is not going to be acceptable. So if I move that about 50 feet to the east, it does not have to go onto their easement and is completely out of the buffer zone. And then, let's see, I'll go back, if you want me to go through more of the history, I can do that as well. But under the 2013 order, the applicant built the roadway, all of the proposed management features except that upper detention basin. And best management practices were followed, but they did not file for a SWIP or a NIPDES. In May of 2020, the applicant filed a notice of intent for a NIPDES and the SWIP. Copies of the SWIP and the NIPDES were attached to the notice of intent, and we're currently doing quarterly monitoring for the last 2 quarters with the EPA, and those reports have not yet, but will be provided to the Attorney General's office. Both quarters, we did not observe any discharge from the pipe, but we're not there for every storm. We pick a storm event and we go, but that doesn't mean that's the one that's going to discharge. One of the violations was construction work without a valid order, and that was the starting working on the retaining wall extension. The last item was the alteration of site hydrology, and I'm assuming that this is the overall earth removal process, and that hasn't really changed from what was proposed in 2013. It has gone out of order, if you will. There was a phase 1 and a phase 2. And they were given permission for the phase 1 from ZBA. But when you start removing the material from the site, you have to take it down in layers. So you have to strip the topsoil off, and then you strip the overburden to get to the rock, and then you start removing the rock. And I think really the issue on that one, as I explained to them last night, it was just poorly thought out in terms of proposing the plan in the beginning, because you can't completely clean out phase 1, which just ran across the front of the property, and still have access to the materials on the top level of phase 2. You get rid of all your access. So I don't know if they've changed the hydrology, if this one applies really or not, but they still need to have a valid order of conditions to keep doing what they're doing. So if you could share your screen with me, or let me share my screen with
I
you.
can make it a presenter if
Yes.
that works for you.
I'm trying to find the right, I'm gonna have to find the, my right plan set here. I have a few different. Two sections. Okay. Okay. This is the property here, as these are existing conditions now, just showing all the contours, the existing roadway, which is right here, coming up. Is my cursor visible like this? Can you see my cursor?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Mine is just like a crosshair. So, just bear with me a second here. It's a little touchy. Hold on one sec. Okay, I think, is that large enough that people can actually see it? So where my cursor here is the driveway access. The two catch basins in question I'm circling right now at the mouth of the driveway. The lower detention basin as it exists now is this right here. And the red line, this is a detention basin that is enclosed with 2 foot by 2 foot by 4 foot concrete blocks. Then there's a retaining wall on where my cursor is moving now that is existing, that was existing back in 2013 when they first started. This wall, I'm coming up to the top, is the retaining wall that was extended per the AG's office. This wall came down to about this location prior to being extended. And then it was brought down like this to join into the driveway. And the grade was relatively flat here to begin with, but it did slope off in this direction. So we added loom across this area and grassed it so that any water that comes across the property this way would end up in, actually it has to come off of the driveway only. And again, it doesn't pitch that way, so I really don't think that this was necessary, but it was required. The water comes off the site and runs down, down the driveway and collects in this detention basin here. Some of the water up here actually flows to the back of the property because this portion of the site has not yet been dropped to its final grade. And moving down, when we talked about how the site was excavated, this on the red side, or this side here, the red, is the phase 1 area, and then the phase 2 area is behind it. And the existing conditions look like the blue, which is they mined out this extent of the phase 1, right, like this. This is an existing stockpile of loom, and the access road runs up the side of the hill in this direction. And so the volume, the as-built excavation area here is down at the bottom. You can see it's 208,383 square feet. The permitted back in 2013 was 207,785 feet. It's a 550 square foot difference between the disturbed areas and the as-built areas, or what was proposed and what is as-built. It's the shape that is different. I'm going to move. This is just specs. I have another set of plans that shows the order of conditions, excuse me, the notice of intent basins. What is being proposed is in blue. Okay, so here's the piece that was extended here, which comes down. I misspoke. There was an existing piece of wall at the bottom. They had us connect these two pieces of wall. There is an existing stoneway and mobile fueling unit area up here. The proposed upper detention basin is a single detention basin in this construction with a concrete block wall, retaining wall, basically not permitting any erosion of the gas easement. We didn't want to have a soft wall. We have a hard wall there to protect the easement. This is the spillway area that I was referring to as being in the 100-foot buffer zone. My cursor is moving right along the 100-foot buffer zone. You can see it comes in here. It carries from up top through here and down. This portion of the spillway that extends onto the easement is the part that we don't want to be digging down in. So the proposal was to move this spillway up into this area where it won't be as long, and what will happen is that when this fills up, the water will come off a gravel apron and flow down the driveway into the lower detention basin. And then it goes through that detention basin. And when that fills up, there's an existing discharge pipe in this location here. It discharges to this catch basin, which in turn flows into the town's stormwater system. The lower detention basin, I showed you the original version of that. It was quite a bit smaller. It was about a quarter or a third of the size. This is, again, going to be outlined in concrete block to prevent any erosion from the sidewalls. It's kind of a limited area. It's very sandy. There is some permeability data on that first plan set that was given, and these basins were designed based on that information. I believe I'm done speaking. If you have any questions or would like to see, I do have this in cross section. We provided that in the notice of intent. For construction on the lower level, we would be placing silt fence between the on the property boundary between the property and the University Ave land. There'd be only there are no stockpiles in this area. Everything that would be dug out directly into vehicles and transported up into the sand and gravel management area. Day piles of maybe putting some stone on the ground, to use while we're doing construction would be allowed. The area would be swept and cleaned at the end of the work day. And we expect what's left to be done to take about a week of work to accomplish it. It may not be all done at once, like they'll do the lower basin in a couple of days and maybe a couple of weeks later do the upper basin. And that is everything that I have.
Thank you, Mr. Fabry. If we could hear from Ms. Jones next and then turn to the commissioners for questions or comments, I think that'd be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do I stop sharing? I want to see you all again. I can't see.
I think if you hit that same screen share button at the bottom of your GoToMeeting application.
Okay, it just it changed shapes on me and I lost track of that button. I'm sorry.
No worries,
There we
Mr. Fabry. Thank you.
I don't have too much to add. I think that was pretty comprehensive. I do have a question for you, Mr. Fabry. It seems like the phasing plan that was originally proposed is now pretty impractical. Is there a phasing plan once earth removal begins again that will be done instead?
When you say phasing plan, but phasing for the excavation.
Yeah, you had the phase 1 and the phase 2.
Yeah, so the last image, well, presented what was proposed, what is existing, and what is again proposed to complete the project. I have those. The plans that I sent you today that showed the relocation of the pre-cut line. If you share with me, I can put it up again.
I think you're still a presenter.
Oh, am I? All right, let's try it.
I'm able to put it up again.
No, yeah, it says I can't share my screen.
Okay, mine says you're a presenter, so I don't know why that is. Let's see.
Oh, because I don't know what I'm doing. Sorry, I don't use GoToMeeting that frequently. This was the plan. Remember we had a conversation about, you were confused about the differences between the plans that were provided to the Concom and the difference in the plan that was provided to the ZBA. And actually, what happened is this red line, this is a pre-cut rock face line. That means they're going to drill, like you see on a road cut, they drill every couple of feet at an angle so that when they break the rock, it breaks in a nice clean face. That's what that line represents. So this is bedrock that is being exposed. It was exposed now. In this face now, this is all bedrock if you were to look up. And I have some pictures in the notice of intent. This is all bedrock face. They're going to basically drill a line of borings so that they can break the rock at a clean face and that there's no loose rock that would fall down from freezing and thawing events, that sort of thing. So that's what this line represents. This line was first drawn in April 2020. And somehow through the process, another line was drawn across this, and now there's two sets of plans. I should say this line is shown differently on different sets of plans because of that error. Because I'll show you, okay, so I put them back to back. This is the same picture with a revised or a different pre-cut line. Okay, so in phase 2, which we're going to the ZBA for right now, is the property was lowered. Again, if you go on Google Earth and you look at it, you'll understand what I'm saying is that the overburden at the low part of the property was deeper than the overburden at the top of the property, and the bedrock sloped up. So as they excavated this out, let me move over a little bit. As they excavated this out, this was their working area because everything else was a hillside. And they dug their way into the middle of the site where they could get away from the roadway and process the material so they could move it out. So when they dug into the site, they crossed the phase 2, phase 1 line that was drawn on the original proposal. So, but this became their working area. And then they started pulling down the sides because, actually not this, the top side is their access road. So they can get up to the top. They left this width so that these lines where my cursor is going, that is a road that runs from the bottom all the way up to the top. So when they need to do work at the top, they can get there. This was processed. This was a big pile of loam, and this whole area has been worked in. But, you know, so when they proposed this, they just didn't think about how you actually have to do this. And they, you know, the engineer drew a line across this and said, this will be phase 1 and this will be phase 2. And, you know, and obviously if you think about it, it can't work that way because Mr. Federico is pretty efficient at doing these things, and he went in and he made a working area. If you go through Google Earth and you look at the amount of material that has come out of this facility and how clean, I don't know if there are any complaints about mud or silt or material getting off here. He runs a very clean operation, and what he immediately did is he got himself back off the roadway where he could work and not, you know, not be tracking it all over the place. So, you know, that is what's happened. And this line coming down here, these two plans, excuse me, this plan shows up and the other plan shows up. And I have a request from the zoning board is to redo my plan set so that they're all the same. And I told them that I would do that. And my problem is I'm working with two different engineers. And I have two different plan sets that I'm trying to combine. And I would like to provide that to the commission as well. I don't think it's quite as critical for the order of conditions because all of this is occurring outside of the, well outside of the buffer zone, and the stormwater detention systems have been designed to take a 100-year storm event from the entire property. So I don't think this.
So what I was getting at is you have creeping up toward 5 acres open right now, and you have about a 10-acre lot. And so I was wondering, as earth removal continues, when you have all your permits, is there a way to revegetate a portion of the area before moving further into more excavation, opening up
The
more?
removal process? Not really, because again, this is, you know what might be helpful? I'm going to, I don't know if it's going to let me do this. I'm going to open Google Earth, okay? And there's an existing aerial photograph of it that I think would be useful in our discussion. Is that okay? The issue is that up the left-hand side, there's a roadway to get to the top, so it can't be vegetated at this time. At the top is where they're doing work, so that, you know, that's the opposite of revegetation. And on the left-hand side of the property, there's a loom pile, there's material piles. And in the central portion of the property, they're using it. So to get, they revegetated all of the side slopes at the front of the facility. And they got that done very quickly in the first year. Everything that is not going to be touched has been loomed and seeded and is quite stable. That is mostly up at the front of the property. I mean, just recently, as they're moving forward, they had, let's see, what the heck is this thing? Okay, so here we are. Here's our access road. The orientation's a little bit different. This is the coming down the slope into the existing detention basin. At the top, so the trucks pull in, they come around, they get loaded, and they leave. So this isn't. I'll say that I think this is 2000. This image is 2019, so it is a little dated, but it represents what's going on at the moment. So this is our stockpile area that is used to feed trucks coming in, and the work area, they separate different grades of material based on size. Over on the left-hand side, this is the loom pile that I was referring to. So as they stripped off material, you know, they've constructed this loom pile that they screen and sell as they can. You can see they're working down here. They drive up this roadway to get to the top, and you know, they come around this edge. Recently, the area where the trees were cut down to remove more of this sand was in this area right here. And it doesn't show on this piece of property, but there's an area right in here that was of issue because the logger cut trees down that were not on Joe's property. And he's working to resolve that now. So this is, you know, the site kind of exists like this today. More has been taken out, but this is why he can't, there's really nothing else to be stabilized at this point in time. The area back here is not getting used, and that's vegetated, but everything else is kind of in play. So we've been asked to have a closure plan to show where the side slopes are that would be graded and loomed and reseeded. And that's basically going to be this area here that looks like a fingerprint that goes around the site. That will all be side slopes, and that will have to be loomed and seeded. In areas, there'll be some trees replanted. The side slopes would all be seeded. I'm not the engineer for that, but that, you know, in the end, that's what that'll look like. This will look like a you know, grassed, and I'm saying grass, it'll be a vegetated slope with plantings around the top of it. And then the front of the property would be the same way. Everything else, it depends on what ends up for the use when the site's been prepared. Does that answer?
Yeah, that does answer my question. The reason that I ask is because I think it's pretty typical for earth removal to be done in phases and for portions to be vegetated as they're completed. So the town I actually used to work in had quite a number of gravel removal projects, and the planning board typically oversaw them and issued gravel removal permits. And it's not that common in Norwood. So, since it was something that was proposed in the original plan for that phasing to happen, and since that's something that I think is kind of typically expected, I was trying to determine if there was a way to make that feasible at this
Well,
moment.
Holly, I think the way that it should have been done is it should have been in phase 1 and phase 2, not by area, but vertically. Because this was there, this was digging into a hillside. So if you dig out the further you dig into the bottom of the hillside, you can no longer get to the top of the hill. And that's, I mean, I don't know what else to say. If you look at how the site was, the material was removed. Here, look, watch this. Okay, so this is, I'm going to go back in time. Okay, this is 2013, just before getting permits. This was a town-owned parcel. This was a road that existed, but not paved. 2014. So this is a hillside going up. The change in elevation is 67 feet to, and this is just Google Earth images, to 164 feet. So the first thing that they did was remove the trees and the loam, and they have stockpiles of loam, and this becomes a much larger stockpile. As you move in, okay, this is 2014. The loam is under the sand right now, but the sand is being taken off of the site. And this is what I meant by it should have been permitted in phase 1 and phase 2 vertically, because you've taken off the loam, now you're stripping off the sand. And if they took all the sand out of the bottom, well, first, they'd have no place to work. Second, if they took all the sand out of the bottom, they wouldn't be able to get to the top. So they have bulldozers and they're pushing the sand down and they're doing earth removal. The next image is 2015. The same thing is going on. You can see over here, there's the large loam pile. There's different piles of gravel that have been screened and sorted. And you can see, there's some material up here on the driveway, but you get down to University Ave, there's nothing out in the street. This is in full swing, and the street is clean. 2016. So 2016, they've removed much of the sand and gravel, and they're starting to break into the bedrock. So like I said, this is their working area right down here. They have aggregate piles for sale. They have a stormwater coming down here into this detention area, and there's nothing out in the street. The access road comes up, and then this is their access road that I'm talking about that comes up along the top of the property to get up here, because we're still at 160 feet up here, but now the floor of this is at 86 feet. So we're going into the rock face. 2017, processing more rock, still have sand and gravel coming down. They're over here digging into the loam pile, processing that. And this is what I mean is the perimeter road around here is what will be the slopes that will be graded, loomed, and seeded. And it'll be like an amphitheater inside of this area. And there'll be a flat floor, which you could put, you know, a parking lot, a building, or whatever you want, you know, on it. This is 2018. They're working more into the rock face, but they're still sorting materials. They still have their access road. You know, there's a little bit out here in the beginning of University Ave, but you know, it's really pretty clean. Again, you can see how the trucks come in, they get loaded, and they come out. Then I think we're back to where we at. Well, this is last year. So the same process is taking place. And, you know, this is very close to the property boundary. There are some trees along the edge of the property boundary, but it's very close to the property boundary, pretty much all the way around it. As you can, you know, this is what we're looking at. So when he's done, that this would all be sloped and graded like this, that perimeter area that I'm talking about. And when you drive into this, it's going to look like a big road cut, an amphitheater with a flat bottom, that you can use to, you know, construct whatever's going to go in there. So it's not unusual to have sand and gravel operations where you finish an area and you take care of the sidewall and you move on. At this particular location, the sidewalls are the access roads, and you can't do that until you finished using them. So, I mean, what they propose to do on the site is what they're doing. It's just, you know, it's just not a clear-cut phase 1, phase 2 sort of thing in a horizontal sense. It has to be vertical. It's going into a hill, and you can't get around to the backside of the hill because you don't own that land.
Okay.
So we have a grading plan that's out there and has been proposed. And what we can do is, I think we need to come up with a seeding plan and a vegetation plan that would be acceptable at the closure of this project. I believe the Zoning Board of Appeals would like that. We have to do it for the stabilization of the project. You can't just leave that up there and expect to use what's underneath it, because you know, it's going to erode. It has to be stabilized. And
Yeah,
that's what the pile of loom is for.
I did see that there was proposed grasses that were included in the notice of intent. I think it was like an erosion control mix for the side slope, and then rye and fescue for the bottom.
Right. I'm not intimate with what they're using on that. I was, you know, really focused on the stormwater aspect of it.
Yeah. So thank you for answering that. Are there, I'd like to open it up to commissioners if any commissioners have questions or comments.
I see you, Peter Bamber.
My question is for you, Ms. Jones, actually, since I keep hearing about plans being changed and consolidated, are we entertaining a motion on the plans that are going to change?
I would suggest that after all of our questions and comments are taken care of, that the hearing is continued until we get the revised plan set that will be the same as what the ZBA is reviewing.
Right.
If the Conservation Commission, I think we should just make sure the Conservation Commission doesn't also have any changes or requests for things to be included on the plan set, so that Mr. Fabry can go away knowing what comments need to be addressed.
Okay, that confirms my thinking. Thank you.
Other questions or comments from the commission? Ms. Miller?
Just kind of a general comment. So an order of conditions that we would issue would have ongoing compliance requirements, which seems to be a problem at this site. There seems to be a clear pattern of disregard, intentional or not, for environmental requirements, not obtaining a NIPDES permit, not obtaining a certificate of compliance from the Conservation Commission, not obtaining an order of conditions for the work that was done. And the approach seems to be to do the work and seek approval for it afterwards. So I guess I would just request some assurance from the applicant that they would intend to comply with an order of conditions that we would issue, and that this history of violations and issues at the site would not continue.
Mr. Fabry, would you like to respond to that?
Yes, I would. I mean, my client fully intends to execute everything that he said that he intends to do. You know, he was taken to task by the Attorney General's office. He realizes that even though he's running a clean and tidy operation, that he has to pay more attention to his paperwork. And I will say that I've worked with a lot of different contractors, and that he's very particular about keeping his sites clean, and he has the equipment to do it, and he's not afraid to do it. And I think that the fact that there have been no complaints about this operation, I have no knowledge of any dust complaints, noise complaints, or tracking of material off the site and contaminating the road. He is at fault for not following through on his paperwork. He's been fined by the Attorney General's office, and the project is back under all of the commissions again. And I think he feels the pain of that and realizes that, you know, the paperwork has to be followed through. He's hired us, and I've worked with FedCorp on environmental projects. I'm a licensed site professional. I've worked on their projects for about 25 years now. And you know, we're following through. We have to respond under the consent decree with quarterly reports to the AG's office for the next 3 years. And he's contracted with us to do it. And we're going to do it. We do it here. We do it at other facilities for him as well. And, you know, I do think that his paperwork was lacking. I don't think, I know. But if you look at how clean the site is his actions aren't lacking at all. There's no oil stains. I mean, it's as neat as clean as you can get a site.
I do appreciate that, but I think it's more than just a paperwork issue. Right? These environmental approvals and processes are in place for a reason, and they're very important. And it's not sufficient to disregard them and then try to remedy the situation after the fact. They have to be followed at the outset. And I would expect that going forward at this site.
I agree with you, and he's hired us to make sure that that happens, to keep track of it for him, basically. So we do that now, and we'll continue to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Fabry, and thank you, Ms. Miller, for the thoughtful comment. Do I have any additional questions or comments from the commissioners? Mr. Bamber?
Since there's nothing we can vote on because we don't have the plan of record that would be dealing with, I would make the motion to continue the hearing to, is the next meeting appropriate for you, Mr. Fabry?
What is the date, please?
December 2nd.
December 2nd?
Yes, sir.
I'm committing somebody. I sent a list of edits to be made to the plans out to the engineer this evening. And I'm going to say, yes, I told them that I needed them before the end of this month. But I guess my hesitation is that I'm not in control of his plans. So if I don't get them from him, then I will notify Holly in advance and
Yeah, you can just submit another continuation
Yeah.
request.
I can tell you some of the edits that were asked to be made for the plans. There were some permeability tests that were listed on page 3 of 4, and the location of the test pits are not on the plans, and they were requested to be put on the plans. Cross sections don't show the elevations. The location of the cross sections in plan view are difficult to see. I need to fix that. They wanted, this is part of the problem, so they wanted the plan set that showed the profile of the proposed basin and the outlets, the stormwater management features that I provided to you, and somebody else prepared the ZBA application earlier. And he used a different set of plans than I did, because I was doing stormwater and he was doing the upland part of the facility. That's needs to be corrected. I have a list. I'll send you a list of what we're going to be fixing on it, so that you could distribute it amongst you.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Mr. Bamber.
I would just like to voice, Mr. Fabry did a fine job explaining things, but my issue is, why are we even having this discussion tonight? We should be holding these discussions when we have the plan of record that was going to be handled going forward. I don't see any point in having these discussions until we actually have the plan that we're going to be ruling on. And in the future, I would not want to be entertaining and spending this hour plus of time doing this when we don't even know what's going to be on the documents that come back until we see it. So I would make the motion to continue to our next meeting, December 2nd, at a time to be determined. Thank you.
Do I have a second?
Well, may I ask a question? Is that I withdraw my question.
I'll
have a
second the motion.
We have work to be done outside of the buffer zone. Is that work that can continue or not continue? So we actually have no work within a buffer zone of a resource area right now. It's the hydraulics of the site, I think, is the issue that's unresolved. And that's an ongoing condition. And all of the only work that was within the buffer zone was the retention wall that was extended. So are we permitted to do work outside of the buffer zone in the interim?
So my recommendation is that the applicant be permitted to continue work on the stormwater aspects of the site while this NOI is in process. Or
Anything else is nothing else is within our jurisdiction except for stormwater and the buffer zone. So anything else you're talking about, you would need to go back and get the permission from the ZBA to continue work. We don't have any say in that.
so there is no earth removal happening on the site right now. So what Mr. Fabry is asking about is just continuing working on the stormwater outside of the buffer zones. And my what I've been saying since issuing the enforcement order is that my interpretation is that work can continue on the stormwater which is what they were doing before I issued the enforcement order.
So then nothing changes. Whatever you told them is still in force, and that's the way it is.
Okay, so we'll extend this hearing to December 2nd, and I'll provide you a full plan set with the closures and, yeah, and it'll be exactly the same as what the ZBA has. It's, all the information is the same. It's just broken, and I'll put it together.
Understood, Mr. Fabry. Thank you for that. I was just asked that when we're taking a vote, we don't have disruptions or interruptions unless it's absolutely necessary. With that being said, Mr. Bamber, if you would and are willing to repeat your motion, and I could have a second to it so that we could proceed with that, it would be appreciated.
Make a motion to continue this hearing till December 2nd at a time to be determined.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Bamber and Mr. Gear. As we've been doing in the remote environment, I'm going to go down the list of conservation commissioners and just ask you to verbally state your position on this vote, starting with myself. Stephen Washburn is in favor. Aye. Chris Capizia.
Aye.
Peter Bamber.
Aye.
John Gear.
Aye.
Heather Miller.
Aye.
Carly Rockland.
Aye.
And Catherine Walsh.
Aye.
Thank you very much. This is going to be continued to December 2nd at a time to be determined. Mr. Fabry, thank you for your thorough explanation, and I appreciate the effort going into correcting some of the inconsistencies in the plan sets that have been provided, and I look forward to seeing something that's been compiled with some thought and energy. So thank you again.
Thank you for having me. Have a good night.
All right, I think that concludes our public hearings for tonight. Next up on the agenda looks like moving into current and expired orders of conditions or matters that pertain to. We have a certificate of compliant request on DEP file number 251-514, Norwood number N2020-02. Site is Dean Street Culvert Replacement. Do we have someone here representing the project team, or Ms. Jones, are we diving right into thoughts and considerations from you?
Yeah, I do see Mr. Nodder from TEC here. I think we both just tried to unmute him at the same time, but now he's unmuted. If you want to go ahead, Mr. Nodder.
How's everyone? Can you hear me? All right, perfect. My name is David Nader, representing, or from TEC, representing the Town of Norwood Engineering Department. But I'll be able to share my screen, and I have a very, very brief presentation to give you some background on it. Oh, jeez. All right, let me see what I can do. Everything's kind of, all the different windows are up in front of me, so. Alrighty, well, I'll keep it in this screen. So, like I said before, my name is David Nader from TEC, presenting on behalf of the Town of Norwood for the Dean Street Bridge rehabilitation projects. So, let's see if my mouse is not working now. I'm having all sorts of issues. I apologize. There we go. So February 22nd, 2019, the culvert that ran underneath Dean Street ended up collapsing underneath the sidewalk and the southern side of Dean Street, opening up a sinkhole. Next slide. So as you can see, it's a CMP archway. It failed right where it met a box culvert that ran another 300 plus feet and let in a bunch of sediment and silt. We went through the permitting process in May 5th, which is a May 6th, 2020. We got the order of conditions, and shortly after that, construction started. So they started by removing the overbearing and then replace the failed archway with a new archway, just a replacement in like kind. They reused the foundations that were still in place to kind of minimize disturbance to the stream. And recently, it had been completely restored. I don't know necessarily a photo of that until after the next slide. So pre-bridge, just the culvert archway. I mean, it was rusting out in the front of it. Dean Street was down to basically squeezing 2 lanes through 1 lane, and then the post-bridge restoration restored the archway and the riprap slope up to the roadway, replaced the guardrail. You know, basically did a whole overhaul of that entire bridge. Next slide is the as-built, which might actually be better shown as a PDF. If my mouse will work. There you go. Oh my goodness, I'm having all sorts of issues. I apologize, people. Well, in any case, the project was completed as shown in the approved plans, with the only differences being there were less impacts actually to the bank and the bordering vegetated wetland that was right there, which was basically allotted for more than what we needed to use for erosion controls. The guardrail was shortened due to an alignment with a telephone pole. Engineering department wanted to keep that open so they could plow through that. And then the grass strip that was proposed was actually removed. The superficial grass strip, I should say, was removed and replaced with asphalt due to just maintenance issues and down the road. So they wanted to just keep that asphalt to allow a wider asphalt sidewalk and just less mowing in that one area. I don't believe I have any other comments to make on it. It was pretty clear cut project. Everything has been restored. I did a site walk yesterday with Holly, and I think at this point I'll turn it over to her if she has any comments or questions.
Thank you, Mr. Nader. I appreciate that. Ms. Jones?
Okay. So on the site walk we did yesterday, as I verified that everything was stabilized. The project has been complete for about a month, and I had initially advised to wait until all of the grass had grown in to make sure that no earth was going to move, and everything is really well vegetated now. It seems like the earth underneath the culvert, or the substrate underneath the culvert, is quite stable and not moving. And everything looked good to me on our site visit. So I would recommend issuing a certificate of compliance on this. I was sort of just irked, that there's less grass than what was permitted. It's quite a small amount, 500 square feet or so, I think. And I think that there's the lessened impacts to bank and bordering vegetated wetland maybe kind of make up some of the potential benefits that could have provided in terms of, well, for wetland values, really maybe very small amounts of habitat for insects. That is, and I did advise that in the future, for reduced vegetation, especially, to come back to the Conservation Commission before moving ahead with the plan change. But here we are. So that's, I would go ahead with issuing the certificate of compliance, but I certainly want to open it up to the commission for questions. I also have pictures in the file share if anyone wants me to go through those. But it looks quite stable.
Ms. Jones, is it also true to say that in that 580 square foot of grass area that there was actually some pre-existing underlying impervious surface as well?
Yeah, that's what's stated in the certificate of compliance request, at least. Mr. Nader, can you confirm that?
Yes, I believe so. I believe that the way it's looked at from a stormwater perspective, anyways, it's over a bridge, and so any sort of vegetated strip, such as grass, is more superficial. It doesn't really equate to, or it equates to a negligible amount of any sort of stormwater infiltration. If that's what you're getting at.
Thank you, Mr. Nader. Yeah, that is what I was getting at. I thought I had read a note or maybe a comment or line in the request that had referred to that, so I appreciate the clarity. Ms. Rockland.
I had noticed in a photo that was included that there were two lines of rocks that went across the width of the brook. And Holly confirmed that those are gone now. And I was curious what their purpose was.
Let me see if I can bring up. So are you talking about in the NOI submission or in the as-built, the COC submission?
It was in the letter to Stephen Washburn. I think it was figure 4.
Okay.
I had been concerned it was affecting fish passage along the brook.
So I believe I know what you're talking about because I saw it, and the smells that they gave me is not working too well. But I asked about that too. We had guys on site throughout construction, and when this photo was taken, the water had significantly receded. It was in that time of low flow, and these were there. I mean, they didn't touch these at all. These were just in the bed of the stream. Currently, though, the water has rose back up again, which covers these. And I think I have. Actually, I don't have photos up right now of those, but I think if Holly has those photos of our sidewalk, it kind of shows that.
I'm wondering if those do still affect fish passage at that height or not. I don't know.
Oh, I couldn't talk to that. That was out of the area of where we touched.
Okay.
I think that's an interesting observation, Ms. Rockland. It almost seems too crude to be any type of velocity mechanism. So what is it? Yeah. I appreciate Mr. Nader's comment that it's outside the project, but very curious. Do we have other questions or comments? Mr. Bamber, I see your hand.
Well, just to talk to that, if you look at that, that's clearly all a man-made stream bed there, if you're looking at it. And in my opinion, to your point, Steve, is concurring with you, that's just left over from previous attempts to work on the property. But that said, if Ms. Jones is happy with this, then I would like to make a motion to issue a certificate of compliance.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Walsh. As we've been doing in the remote environment, I will go down the list of commissioners and just ask you to verbally state your position on this vote, starting with myself, Stephen Washburn. In favor, aye. Chris Capizio?
Aye.
Aye.
Peter Bamber? John Gear?
Aye.
Heather Miller?
Aye.
Carly Rockland?
Aye.
and Catherine Walsh.
Aye.
Thank you for that, and thank you for being here tonight, Mr. Nader. Also appreciate some of the review of the presentation materials and you entertaining the conversation in question about those odd.
Of course. Thanks for having me. Thanks for hearing me.
All right. Next on our agenda, it looks like we have request for modification of wetland replication area for DEP number 251-0485. Norwood number is N2017-03. Site location is Norwood Airport Hangar. Ms. Jones?
Yeah, so we have Randy here. Do you want to have this off, Randy, or do you want me to explain?
Yeah, I don't have the ability to put the plan up, Holly. Are you able to put the plan up?
Yep. Okay.
Okay, so the area highlighted in red, if you can zoom in on that, is well. Let me give just a little background. We were constructing the wetland replication at the new hangar being constructed at the Norwood Airport, and during the installation of the replication area, the area in the red. We unearthed the sewer line that's very shallow to the to grade there. The sewer is almost at the surface of the ground. So we weren't able to complete the entire replication in the approximate area of the red area. So we were proposing to take the area that we weren't able to construct and add it to the west end of the replication in the area in green. Down below. So we had Norwood Engineering come out yesterday, Holly, and they surveyed the area of the replication that we've completed. And then we'll use that information to calculate how much area we weren't able to complete based on the 1,670 square feet required, and we will then add that area to the other end if that's acceptable to the board.
Okay, thank you. So my comments on this are, this is again, sort of a preliminary question for the commission is whether to accept this requested or proposed change as a field change or require an amended notice of intent. Then whichever way the commission would decide to move forward. I was looking for potential other areas where the wetland replication could go because the area in question is it's quite contiguous with the wetland to the extent that it probably shares some of the same functions that the adjacent wetland does. And it seemed, I was like, oh, do we really want to disturb this forested area adjacent to the wetland for the replication? But I couldn't really find any places where there could be a better area. I wanted to suggest that if the replication does go forward in this area, that the trees that are there be left. There's some, I think, gosh, I should have paid more attention to the types of trees, but there's some large trees. Some of them are maples, I think maybe cherries. And I think that leaving them to the extent possible, and maybe they will survive, maybe they won't if the hydrology of the area changes, but either way, they'll probably provide some habitat benefit. And then my other consideration was I think that the soil from the isolated wetland over here has already been all spread out through the rest of the wetland replication. And so we would just want to carefully, we would want to know the source of the soils that would be going into the other portion of the wetland replication.
Yes, so I believe that we still have a stockpile of loam that we had stripped off the area kind of right adjacent to the wetland that we excavated, and it's all very much similar soils out there. You know, the whole area, you know, around the wetland, I think honestly was the same material, but obviously it's hard to say. But we do have a stockpile of loam that's still on site that you certainly can look at it and see if that's acceptable. I think without knowing the exact final math, I think we might only affect one tree kind of in the area where the arrow is pointing to. There's one big tree there.
Okay.
And then the rest of it's kind of lower ground cover. I guess the only question would be if we lower the grade around the tree, whether we'll end up damaging the roots of the tree. But that's something we can look at the time. Maybe we can work around it enough to kind of contour in that area. I don't know if the other thing is, I know we're replicating 1,670 square feet. It looks like what we disturbed or was proposed to be disturbed was less area. Is there a way to reduce the total area?
So it's not clear from the plan. Is the green area the same square footage as the red?
Well, we don't know the exact measurements. Well, we had Norwood Engineering come out and survey the whole area to determine what we were actually able to build. And then we'll do the calculation to calculate what's deficient, and then that area is what we'll propose to add on the green. So I'm guessing we're short 200-300 square feet of wetlands, somewhere in that range, that we weren't able to replicate.
Mr. Bander,
That seems kind of important, right?
Right. Well, my question is, what we've done in the past at the airport is actually moved so everything was contiguous. So I would go back to you, Ms. Jones, and say, what we've done is we've moved things around down there only to make sure that we didn't have an isolated wetland sitting somewhere that was going to fail. So we've allowed them to be extended in this fashion in the past, and which was a good practice. But at the same time, I would also go right back to you and say, with your expertise, if you think this will succeed, then great. If you don't think it'll succeed, then let's look elsewhere.
That's a good question. I know that the wetlands scientist for the project, who's from Epsilon, told me that they had originally proposed an isolated wetland as essentially an in-kind replacement for the isolated wetland that was being filled. And I think that is a possibility. It would be if they were replicating, so the replication in this sort of narrow area.
If I could clarify, Holly, basically what I'm saying is we've seen isolated wetlands fail in the past, so that's when we went to this model. So just to clarify that for you.
Yeah, that makes sense, and I think it's a good idea to keep it contiguous with this bordering vegetated wetland, particularly since that's where the rest of the replication is.
Ms. Jones, do you have any comments or considerations related to this Walsh's thoughts surrounding potential shortage of replication.
You were breaking up a little there, Steve, but I think, did you ask if I have thoughts about potential shortage in the replication area? Yes. Yeah, okay. So this actually originated from a site visit that I did with Ms. Rockland and Ms. Capizio after the Ellis Dam workday on the 7th, where we went out and just kind of looking at the slopes next to the right of way, and eyeballing it, it seemed, you know, I was concerned that the slope was potentially causing a portion of the area to not actually be effective as a wetland replication. And so I think that the proposed area would work better as a wetland replication because it is almost the same elevation as the bordering vegetated wetlands that it is next to, rather than kind of having this sewer line that it's kind of butting up against. Does that answer your question?
So could I ask a question, Holly? I thought I just heard you say you were somewhat interested in having the replication be closer to the red area, but then I just heard you say that you thought that the green area was a suitable location?
Yeah. So my thoughts, I don't think we can really have it next to the red area because of the sewer right of way. My hesitation about the green area is just that it is almost the same as the adjacent wetland already. It's one of those areas where it looks like the wetland line was kind of ambiguous. And so digging up that area and then, you know, putting in different loam and different plants is, you know, maybe a marginal improvement on the functions and values in terms of like flood control and habitat and so on. But it does mean that it's an area, you know, it's very close to being a wetland, which means that it probably would succeed as a wetland replication.
Thank you.
Ms. Jones, Randy, I think, had asked, and Randy, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there was some question about perhaps the area that was proposed to be disturbed was less than the as-built condition of disturbance, and he was curious about whether he had to meet the original proposed replication or the actual as-built disturbed area.
My question was the area that was of the isolated wetland that was is being filled in says it's 1,412 square feet, and we're replacing 1,670 square feet. So I wasn't sure if that 250 some odd square feet could, you know, maybe not even be done where, like Carly was saying, we're removing woodland to create wetland almost at the same elevation. And maybe, Holly, once we see what the as-built measurements are, that might help us clarify that anyways. You know, we might be well short of the 1,600, or we might be close to it. I don't know until we get the calculations from the Norwood Engineering survey, which was done yesterday, actually.
Yeah, I think having that information would be helpful to this discussion.
So quick question, and maybe this is like a new commissioner question. Randy, who are you with?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm the general contractor doing working on the project.
And and what company is that?
My company is the Site Management Group.
Okay.
Sorry about that. I should have introduced myself earlier.
Okay. I was like, did I miss something? Okay. Thank you.
Yes, I think the engineer of record for the project's the town engineer from Norwood, right?
So to answer that question about potentially doing less wetland replication than what was included, I would say that I would be hesitant to do that. The act requires a 1-to-1 replication, but that's almost never what's proposed because it tends to be accepted that not all of a wetland replication is going to be successful. And so if you do a little bit more, it's more likely that you'll actually end up with a 1-to-1 replication. And so certainly if there was less area proposed, I think that would be an amended notice of intent and not a field change. But I would advocate for the full permitted amount of wetland replication to be what is accomplished.
Can I make a suggestion? We're going to receive, when we receive the calculation from Norwood Engineering and we calculate the few hundred square feet that we need to replicate, is it something that can be done, like you said, Holly, administratively, where we go out there and let's say we need 300 square feet, we'll stake out a 300 square foot area, either with you or with Epsilon, and, you know, it can change. Certainly, it doesn't have to be exactly the way my green area is. It could extend further towards wetland flag number 2 to the south, and be a little longer or narrower. I mean, we could certainly kind of go around the tree. There's also a big boulder there that I'm assuming we would go around and not try to move. So it seems like once we get the calculation, we could kind of go out there and map out the best way to create that deficient square footage. And I think that's probably the best way to handle it, really, is a kind of a field decision. But I don't know what we need from you, or if we need the town engineer to redraw it, or what needs to happen.
So I think that we should end up with plans that show where the wetland is. But it does make sense to map it out in the field if the commission is amenable to accepting this as a field amendment. Then I would think that, you know, we could go out there and figure out where the best spot is adjacent to that west side of the wetland and start it, and then the plans could come potentially after, so long as it's in the same general location, if the commission would accept that.
So Holly, I have a question. And you seasoned, mature commissioners, tell me if I'm like out of line. I don't understand why there isn't an owner's rep here at some of these. So Randy, with all due respect, I know that you're the GC, but the bottom line is you can't make any decisions. So I guess I'm unclear why a representative from the town, I'll say / owner, isn't here. And I guess I'll extend that to the previous discussion where the business owner was on the call, but didn't make any representations, particularly in regard to what Carly was saying. So I if I'm out of line, you guys correct me. So I guess I'll just leave it at that. I mean, thoughts?
If I may, basically this is a situation where it's a town property that sometimes they come on and with us and do these discussions other times. If it's the light department, a light department person will come, depends upon the situation. In this case, we're talking about an area that's basically one giant wetland as it is, with some dirt with some runways on it, most of the time rising above the flood zone, but not all the time by any stretch.
Yeah.
And so in this situation, I think the smartest thing to do is rely on Holly's expertise to go out and see what makes sense to pick an area out for successful replication, because this whole area, the reason why we wanted to get rid of that isolated one was because they tend to fail, and then having to make it contiguous is fine. And your point about the elevations is apt, Holly, and if you're only going to lose one tree at worst, it sounds like, based upon what you see, I would be in favor of that scenario, making it a field change and let you make the call, because I think of this group, let me rephrase that. We have some pretty talented people in this group, but beyond me, I have the least amount of knowledge of what you're going to be looking at. So, so that's why I would rely on your expertise.
So I appreciate that, Peter, and I absolutely agree. I mean, Holly's the expert in this. I want to defer to her, and I would totally defer if this was a one-to-one replication, but it doesn't appear to be. And furthermore, I mean, here we are, just like in the last discussion, we're being asked to weigh in on something where we don't even have a complete plan set. So I guess, your frustration on the last hearing, I'm having the same frustration on this hearing. So I just wanted to toss that out.
Well, to that, if I may, Holly, would it make sense for you to go out and with Randy Walker, determine it, and then have them refile it with us as a field change, and then we vote on it?
That sounds good to me. I would like to have the wetland scientist from Epsilon there as well, to help with that. Randy, are you okay with that?
I'm fine either way. Like I said, we have Norwood Engineer. Once we have Norwood Engineering's calculations, we can certainly map it out. And then, just a lot of, I guess, extra cost and field work to have you and I and Epsilon map it out. Then what we'd have to have the town engineer or somebody survey it to put it on a drawing, only then to build it, and then to resurvey it after we build it. It seems like it's such a small area that it makes more sense to me to you and Epsilon agree in the field, we build it, and then we as-built it, and then we provide at the end the certificate of compliance and the as-built that we've done it with the proper 1,600 square feet. But if you want to go through the extra step, it's certainly the board's decision. And would have to have the town engineering department get involved at that point to redraw the plan.
Well, after hearing what Ms. Walsh has to say, I have to support her position on that.
That's fine. I mean, I'm sure I will we'll set up the meeting, and then I'll let Mark Ryan, the town engineer, know, and then I will talk about how he wants to map it out and then represent it to the board.
Okay, so it sounds like we'll look at the area that needs to be replicated. You, myself, and the wetland scientist from Epsilon will go and maybe determine in the field the best place to get that square footage, and then we'll have the town engineering department come out, survey it, and bring that plan back to the commission to approve.
That's fine.
Ms. Catizio, did I see your hand go up?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I hear Ms. Walsh suggesting is that she'd just like to make a more efficient use of the board's time and perhaps have questions answered, with appropriate representation, which may just be a process thing that we can clarify in the future. So of course it makes sense now to go back and do the extra step and come back again, but perhaps in the future we could just articulate in advance what would make the most sense, and then only have the proposals presented at a time where, you know, we can hear everything that we need to hear, and we're seeing what we need to see. So a little bit, you know, when projects are a little bit further down the way.
Do we have to do anything on this now, Holly, or is it just moot? You're just gonna meet with him? We don't need a vote on this, do we?
No, I don't think that you need to vote at this time. We can email to set up a time to figure out that field thing. What's kind of the informal direction of the commission.
Well, once I get the calculations, Holly, from Norwood Engineering of what we've actually constructed so far, we can certainly set up a time with Epsilon at that time to have a meeting. And then we have I'll reach out to Mark Ryan and let him know what our plans are and see if he wants anybody from the town, from engineering to come out or not until after we've laid out the area.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay, all right, guys, thank you for your help tonight.
Thank you for being here, Andy.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Next on our agenda, I believe we're moving into Conservation Commission business, Conservation Agency report, and some starting off with some information about the Ellis Dam cleanup day.
Yeah, so I truly don't have very much to say about the Ellis Pond cleanup day, but I wanted to make space for commissioners to give any feedback on how that went, if anyone wants to, or we can move right along since it's getting late.
If I could, since he was the original catalyst for us. I'm sorry that I couldn't be there that day, but our local community food pantry was quite.
I'm sorry, I can't tell if there's a delay. Is there a delay?
I think Steve's audio is out of whack.
Okay. So Holly, I just would like, if you could just give us a quick recap, you know, what was the majority of work that was done? Did you get to use your waders? Where, you know, what types of cleanup did you see? Where was the, you know, a majority of the waste, that kind of thing? Any kind of, you know, data and stats that you could share?
Yeah, so first of all, I think it was pretty successful in terms of the number of people who ended up coming. There are a number of commissioners' families, and folks from the neighborhood. Most of the work was kind of brush removal and with a sprinkling of trash cleanup. And I can't quantitatively say how much brush removal was done, but it was actually quite a bit. We ended up with several piles about my height of brush. I did not get to use my waders, unfortunately, but quite a bit was cut from the dam itself, from the apron walls adjacent to the dam, and then we had an industrious team picking up trash from the Nichols Street access, and as well as clearing the path. Does anyone have anything else to add to that report back?
It looks like Carly had something to say.
Sorry, I have a follow-up question. So a bunch of us were pruning the shrubs off of the dam. And I was wondering, what is the follow-up for that in terms of ensuring that shrubs continue not to grow on the dam and potentially damage the structure of it, what is there follow-up, and what would it be?
There's a dam inspection every couple of years that we have to pay for, and typically one of the findings is that there's stuff growing out of the dam that needs to be cut out of it.
I was doing some reading, and I read if you, I guess from riprap, when you cut off the stems of shrubs, then there's a question of do you then remove the stem down to beneath the surface of the soil, or do you paint herbicide onto the stems so they don't grow back? I think that's what I was wondering about.
Yeah, so I don't have a follow-up plan. I think that right now the plan is to continue doing this cutting back annually. I think that herbicide application is definitely worth considering as well. A painting herbicide application, but it's not something that's on my radar.
Okay. The other thing I was wondering was, we were out there and, trimming the vegetation, and a number of the species were native, which you would generally want to leave alongside a shoreline of a waterway to help with, preventing erosion, helping with filtering of stormwater, and providing wildlife habitat. And I was wondering if the abutters around that waterway or other waterways in Norwood have been reached out to about how to environmentally friendly maintain their shoreline.
Does anyone know if that is something that?
Well, in previous meetings, we have made mention that they're allowed to rid the shoreline of an invasive species, but at no time have we told them to rid the shoreline of native species.
I don't know that a number of people could distinguish between the two. So perhaps in the future there could be some sort of public education around, I guess, maintaining shorelines in a helpful way to the ecology there. It's a thought.
Good one.
Holly,
Yeah,
can you
so-
stop sharing your screen so we can see people?
I'm
You mind?
sorry. Yes.
No worries. And I agree. I think, Carla, that's a great idea.
I guess I could add a little bit more. When I worked at NEPRA, and NEPRA was managing Willett Pond and the shoreline there, they would educate the abutters there about how best to manage their land along the water. So I know that that's happened there, but that was a while ago now. And I wasn't sure how widespread that was across the town in general. So thank you for hearing me.
Did they do mailings, or what was the education method?
I think there were workshops, because I know that they'd go around to the folks living there, and if they saw a violation, they would work with them to try to fix it. I wasn't involved in that. I was a different employee there who worked with that. It was Tom Palmer, who's still there in a different capacity.
Okay. So considering workshops about shoreline management, maybe reaching out to NEPRA to see if they have resources or suggestions for doing that. Sounds like the direction you're suggesting.
Potentially, I'm not sure what else is out there, whether it's DEP or other folks.
Mm-hmm.
That's just my experience. I know the NEPRA connection.
Mm-hmm. Oh, one thing I can add for shoreline management, an important part of shoreline management is keeping your geese in check. And we had a suggestion to put up a more conspicuous sign not to feed the geese, which the DPW said they would be happy to do. So I asked them to just put something up right under the sign that's already there at the entrance. So that's happening, at least.
I haven't had geese on my property in 20 years,
That's good.
but I've got 5 dogs.
That helps. Tell everyone.
I'll tell you, Peter, I think you're the model for me. That's the 5-dog model is something I'm working towards.
Are folks willing to move ahead to the conservation agent's report? Okay. So not too much. From the office, the planning and conservation department is planning to hire a recording secretary, and that's in progress, and someone has actually been offered the position. So that'll be someone who is just responsible for taking minutes at our meetings. So hopefully the person who the position has been offered to will accept, and I can introduce you to them soon. And then I had some updates on violations that we're working on. The Skating Club of Boston has installed all of their plantings, and they had asked about applying for a certificate of compliance, but I advised them to wait until the summer because they actually just did their hydro seeding of that drainage way, and I wanted to make sure everything was kind of coming in successfully. I also was out at the Jane Center recently, and they have also installed all of their plantings. But when I was out there, I found that they haven't removed, there's still quite a few wood chips in the pond and in the bordering vegetated wetland to the pond. So I had to re-impress upon them that removing those wood chips from the pond was a really important part of their restoration effort. And they really wanted to use like some kind of machine to try and scoop those out, and I told them that it had to be done by hand. And so they're trying to muster teams of people to do that work moving forward, but they still have quite a bit of wood chips in the pond. The plantings look good though.
Holly, could I ask, well, we gave them a break, and I'm all for giving them a break, but at the same time, if they don't get those wood chips out, I don't know that I'm interested in still giving them a break. So you might want to impart that to them, that I know it's cold now, and so maybe we give them into the spring when it warms up again, but after that, that'd be, there's a problem.
Yeah, I told them to do it now before the pond freezes. They had asked about waiting until next summer, thinking that the water would recede, and I told them that they should do it now because the violation happened in the summer when the water levels were low and the wood chips weren't removed then. We're still in a drought, so there's no guarantee that the water levels will go down. So yeah, I'm not giving them a break until spring, I guess, although who knows if they'll succeed actually before spring.
Just a question about the process for something like that. So do you have to keep going out and checking to see if they've complied with everything that we asked them to do, or do we ask them to submit, some photos and documentation that everything's been done, and then maybe you can go out and confirm it? But I just, so that you're not going out there all the time and repeating the same things over and over again.
Yeah, I'm not going out there all the time. I actually went out because they had installed the plantings, and so they were really excited and like, oh, we did it, and then I went out and was like, oh, but taking the wood chips out is actually almost more important to the Wetland Protection Act, at least, than the plantings. So I did ask them to essentially follow up with me in a couple of weeks after they'd done the work. So that's the plan for now. Otherwise, there is some members who've been on the commission for a while will be familiar with Talbot Farm Estates, which has an outstanding order of conditions from, I think, more than 10 years ago, that was never closed out, and is essentially, the basin has never been maintained. And that, I think, is finally in the process of being maintained, and they're going to, the detention basin was actually built around an existing pond that was jurisdictional under the bylaw. And so they're going to start cutting vegetation around the detention basin. And so I wanted to mention that in case people, they're cutting vegetation around a pond because that's where their stormwater basin is. But it's around the basin on the side away from the pond. But you may hear about that essentially because it is vegetation removal near one of our protected resources. And I also just wanted to say, since we're on a recorded meeting, and I wanted to say to all of our fans out there in Norwood, since we're in the fall now, and there's a lot of leaves on the ground, just kind of the PSA to make sure your storm drains are clean, and take leaves off of them, and to consider leaving leaves in place. If people can do so, just it helps out local insect populations if you're able to do that, whether it's with a mulching mower or just leaving them in a pile somewhere. And Norwood is actually really lucky to have a compost facility where, if you're a resident, you can get free permits. So if you do have yard waste to compost, that is an option, and it's a better option than dumping it in a wetland. The other thing that came up today, actually, to let you all know about, this wasn't on the agenda, so I'm not sure how much we can discuss it, but I did have a couple of folks let me know about some people building what looks like a skate park over by Westbrook Parkway. I think that's the right name of the street. There's a path, and people have been constructing little ramps adjacent to the street. It hasn't gone into any wetland resource areas yet, but it looks like it might soon. And so I guess my plan right now is to send a letter to all of the residents of the street, just letting them know that that's something that is, if someone wants to build a cool skate park trail, they should come talk to us first, at least. And I think that it is a great recreational activity, but should be done with the permission of the landowner, which in this case is the town, and just making sure that they're not going into protected resources. So the DPW and the police have also been made aware of that. So hopefully whoever is making those cool skateboard ramps will maybe find a more appropriate spot for it. That's all I have for my report. And you all probably guessed by now because I haven't sent you the minutes, but I actually didn't finish the minutes again, so I apologize for that, and I'll have them for you next time.
Thank you, Holly. Do I have a motion?
Motion to adjourn?
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. As we've been doing in the remote time, and I'll just go down the list of commission members and ask you to verbally state your position on the vote, starting with myself. Stephen Washburn is in favor. Aye. Chris Capizio.
Aye.
Peter Bamber.
Aye.
John Gear.
Aye.
Heather Miller.
Aye.
Carly Rockland.
Aye.
And Catherine Walsh.
Aye.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for being here tonight. Another late night, but